Welcome back, everyone. Thank you for watching Yesteryear TV. These are the horror movies, the best horror movies of 1967. Let's check out the movies that were scaring audiences all over the movie theaters of 1967. Let's check them out. Frankenstein created woman. After being reanimated, Baron Frankenstein transfers the soul of an executed young man into the body of his lover, prompting her to kill the man who wronged them. Frankenstein created woman. Next up we have is the frightening, terrifying movie King Kong Escapes. Action, adventure, and family, and horror. Inspired by Rankin Bass Productions' animated TV series The Evil Doctor Who, captures King Kong to dig for Element X when his robot duplicate, Mechani Kong, is unable to do the job. King Kong Escapes. Santo versus the Martian Invasion. Again, the masked Mexican wrestler in white. The masked wrestler battles Martians intent on taking over Earth. Santo versus the Martians. These movies are campy, glorious, beautiful color, and they're great. Son of Godzilla. A reporter stumbles upon weather experiments on a tropical island, discovering giant mantids, a castaway woman, and an infant monster that Godzilla must adopt and learn to raise. Son of Godzilla. Now this movie was cheesy, but if it's Godzilla, you had to watch it. A Taste of Blood. A businessman turns into a vampire after drinking brandy laced with vampire blood, and sets out on an odyssey of killing the descendants of Dracula's executioners. A Taste of Blood. So this movie is gory and good. Baron Bracola. The evil Baron Bracola, or Bracola, wakes up from his sleep in order to take revenge and defeat the man in the silver mask. Again, this is El Santo, the masked wrestler from Mexico. I love these movies. Blood of Ghastly Horror. A mad scientist implants an electronic device into the brain of an injured soldier, which turns him into a psychotic killer. Blood of Ghastly Horror. This movie is creepy. It's a horror and sci-fi. Blood of the Virgins. Ophelia's wedding day is approaching and she is to be married to Eduardo. She has some pre-wedding jitters during a meeting with her lover, Gustavo, but decides to tie the knot anyways. Until Dracula appears. Blood of the Virgins. Again, the blue masked wrestler, Blue Demon contra los Diabolicas, the Diabolicals. A mad doctor has kidnapped and made a group of cape-wearing, go-go booted women his servants. Go-go boots. They assist him in kidnapping politicians and millionaires so that he can turn them into zombies. Dr. Faustus. A man sells his soul to the devil in order to have the women he loves. Dr. Faustus. That would be horrible though. You sell your soul to the devil, but once you die, you're in hell? Ugh, that'd be horrible. Dr. Faustus. The Fearless Vampire Killers. A noted professor and his dim-witted apprentice fall prey to their inquiring vampires while on the trail of the ominous damsel in distress. The Fearless Vampire Killers. Comedy and horror. Gallery of Horror. John Carradine narrates 5 horror tales with macabre twists. A couple fixes a strange old clock. The Scotland Yard is after a serial killer. A murder scientist seeks revenge, and on and on and on. Gallery of Horror. Next thing we have is Gamera vs. Gaius. Volcanic activity unleashes a bloodthirsty monster called Gaius the Gamera must confront. Again, King Kong, Godzilla, Gamera, Gaius, Mothra, Rodan, Ghidorah. What else? The son of Frankenstein? Hillbillies in a haunted house. A trio of country singers becomes stranded at a haunted mansion and gets mixed up with spies. Comedy, family, and horror. I love these movies. The 60s were great. hillbillies in a haunted house. So this movie is going to be funny with some horror in it. Island of the Doomed. Baron von Wesser keeps a menagerie of carnivorous plants, but takes a great care of one particular specimen. Island of the Doomed, horror and sci-fi. So check out the plants. The plant's going to kill people. It, the original movie It. After one of their storehouses burns down, museum director Grove and his assistant Pym find that everything except for one statue has been destroyed. It comes to life and kills people. Horror and sci-fi. One of the best movies of all time, Mad Monster Party. On the Isle of Evil, the head of the World Organization of Monsters reveals his imminent retirement and that he has refined the formula for total destruction. Animation, comedy, and family. When this movie came out, it was breathtaking. It was scary, funny, and good. Night Fright. Not Fright Night, but Night Fright. Horror and sci-fi. A government-based experiment into the effects of cosmic rays on animal life goes horribly wrong, creating a mutant monster that terrorizes a rural community. Night Fright. Horror and sci-fi. Night of the Big Heat. While mainland Britain shivers in deepest winter, the northern island of Farah bakes in the 90s. Oh, really? So they're getting all hot in the 90s? Wait till they go to Las Vegas. Night of the Big Heat. Las Vegas is like 110, 115. Only a Coffin. A doctor invites his relatives to his castle, all the while planning to murder them when they arrive. Only a Coffin. Crime and horror. There's no comedy, but I'm sure you can make fun of it. But it's a crime and horror film. Next thing we have is Playgirl Killer. Horror. A rich, lonely woman hires a drifter as a live-in handyman. The drifter turns out to be a psycho artist who has beautiful women model for him, then kills them. Playgirl Killer. So be careful who you meet up and who you take in your house, because they will seduce you and kill you. Quatermass and the Pit. A mysterious artifact is unearthed in London, and famous scientist Bernard Quatermass is called in to divine its origins and explain its strange effects on people. Next up we have is the legendary movie She Freak. Look at her face. Claire Brennan stars as a witness who leaves the greasy diner business for the excitement of the carnival. She quickly discovers that she despises freaks and human oddities. She Freak. Horror. Something weird. Fantasy and horror. An accident victim makes a deal with a particularly hideous witch, in which he receives extraordinary ESP powers. He uses these powers to help the police solve crimes. Something weird. Fantasy and horror. Spider Baby, or the maddest story ever told. A caretaker devotes himself to 3 demented siblings after their father's death. Comedy and horror. Come into my parlor, said the spider to the Spider Baby. There'll be kills and jump scares. The Empire of Dracula. A group of beautiful female vampires lure men to their estate so they can feed on their blood. The Empire of Dracula. Horror, mystery, and thriller. These movies are getting good, right? They're getting scarier, cornier, cheesier, but I love it. The Shuttered Room. This movie scared me when I first saw this in 1976. A series of horrific murders is traced to a creature that inhabits a very strange house. The Shuttered Room. Horror. This used to be on regular TV. There were only 4 TV stations back then. And when it came out, it was scary. The Torture Chamber of Dr. Sadism. A count executed for murdering 12 virgins in a bid for immortality returns to life, seeking revenge on the daughter of his intended 13th victim and the son of his prosecutor. The Torture Chamber of Dr. Sadism. The Gruesome Twosome. A demented elderly woman has her mentally retarded son kill and scalp various young women to use their hair for her wig shop while a persistent co-ed tries to link various killings to them. The gruesome twosome. The Panther Woman. The Panther Women are worshippers of Satan and perform rituals in their honor and sacrifice. The fighters will face them up and down the ring. The Panther Women. Horror, action, and sci-fi. Next up we have is The Sorcerers. Horror and sci-fi. Again, Boris Karloff. An aging hypnotist creates a device that allows the user to control the mind of another person. But his wife abuses its power by manipulating a younger man to commit evil acts. The Spirit is Willing. Comedy and horror. A couple and their teenage son rent a haunted New England seaside house, and their summer vacation turns into a ghost hunt. The Spirit is Willing. Comedy and horror. Next up we have is Theater of Death. Horror, mystery, and thriller. The Theater of Death in Paris specializes in horror presentations. A police surgeon finds himself becoming involved in the place through his attraction to one of the performers. Starring Christopher Lee, Theater of Death. Creature with the Blue Hand. Scotland Yard is after a homicidal maniac called the Blue Hand, which is what he uses to kill his victims. So I'm sure witnesses probably see it. All I saw was a blue hand. Oh, what do you mean a blue hand? He kills people. This movie is good. The Mummy Shroud. In 1920, an archaeological expedition discovers the tomb of an ancient Egyptian child prince. Returning home with their discovery, the expedition members soon find themselves being killed off one by one. The Mummy Shroud. Torture Garden. Fantasy and horror. An anthology of 4 short horror stories about people who visit Dr. Diabolo's fairground haunted house attraction show. Torture Garden. Do you dare see what Dr. Diabolo sees? If you do, you will die. And last one we have is The Living Corpse. Crime, drama, and horror. A rendition of the Dracula tale with many similarities to the British 1950s Dracula. The Living Corpse. This movie is eerie, suspenseful, and gory. Those were the horror movies that we loved. Those were the horror movies that were released in 1967. Which movies do you remember seeing in 1967? Not in that year, but what movies do you remember of that year that you saw possibly? Did they scare you? Did you laugh at them? Again, I've seen most of these films. I have all the Santo and Blue Demon Mexican Lucha Libre films. I have all those in my collection. I love those films. But 1967, again, more creatures, more zombies, vampires, mummies. I love horror movies. And 1967 did not disappoint. Alright, thanks for joining me. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback, leave them below. I look forward to your comments. And I'll see you all in the next video. Thank you for joining me here at Yesteryear TV.